Joining us on the line now is Lanny Davis, former Clinton White House counsel, author of the book Crisis Tale. And Lanny, I want to touch base with you this morning about the Secret Service scandal, because you've been at a White House going through crisis, and there comes a time sometimes when somebody just has to go, that it's reached critical mass and a decision has to be made. How do these decisions get made? Because at this particular White House, hours before she was sort of forced to resign, it sounds like, she was getting the full support of the White House. So what happens behind the scenes in these moments?
Well, first of all, good morning. I'm going to try to stay brief in my answers today to surprise both of you guys. Okay. Behind the scenes, the President and the First Lady must have been furious for not being told about the incident in the elevator. I think that was a breaking point. The over-the-fence dangers, there obviously are a dozen or more people who should be fired. And the head of the organization always takes the responsibility. But the real issue for me is why were the First Lady and the President and the rest of us lied to, and I have to use the word lie because I hate it, as to what really happened for a great period of time. They were saying that the man was detained inside the front door when he wasn't. They lied. Did they really think, as crisis management rule number one, it's going to come out sooner or later? Why would you mislead people, especially the man in the elevator? How did he get there?
Well, and Lanny, you literally wrote the book on crisis management. So, I mean, do you think that it was the Secret Service who hid this story, or do you think that there were White House staffers? Because there's a report today in the Washington Post that there was a lot of pressure from White House staffers pushing back on the Secret Service because they thought that the Secret Service had too heavy a hand and too big a footprint with regard to security, not just at the White House, but on the president's trips abroad as well.
Well, for sure. There's, to me, this is about cover-up, as it always is when you get into political crises, White House crises from Richard Nixon all the way forward. It's about decisions not to tell the public. I recall a decision by the White House counsel not to tell the president about the the IRS scandal because they didn't want him to know. Now we have decisions made not to tell the public that the man got into the East Room, or decisions not to tell the President and the First Lady that there was a man in an elevator taking photographs, actually recording and doing things with a cell phone, and they didn't know that he had a weapon. How did he get into the elevator? The whole thing has to be uncovered, investigated, whatever you call it, because the cover-ups is part of the illness here that has been a problem that should have been solved a long time ago that threatened the lives of the president. It's really unbelievable.
Follow up on this thing that you mentioned just a moment ago. That is that when there is a crisis, you got to tell the whole story up front, and it's better if the bad news comes from you rather than comes out in dribs and drabs in Washington Post cover stories. And in this particular case, you mentioned the fact that initially we were all led to believe, they got him right inside the door. Well, then it turns out that is not true. Then it turns out that the only reason the guy was even captured at all was because there was an off-duty agent who happened to be wandering by.
I'd like to know whether anyone outside of the inner circle of the cover-up people in the secret cover-up is a crime, by the way. People in the Secret Service who I respected greatly. I used to hang out with them and help them in any way that I could during the Clinton impeachment matter where they were being called in front of grand juries. So I have great respect for these people, but there was a decision made by a circle of people not to tell the truth. And the incident in the elevator is even more shocking, not to tell the President and the First Lady what about the man who shot the White House, and they didn't even follow up on that. How many people knew about this, and what did they know, and when did they know it? It's now time, once again, in Washington to go through another cycle of learning that when you try to hold back bad news, it's coming out anyway. Now you've got two bad stories, the bad news and the cover-up.
Well, Lanny Davis, I like you and admire you so much. You know that. I'm loath to point this out, but you're just talking about a cover-up and how the best thing to do is to get all the information and all of the documents out up front so that you can mitigate the damage, and the American people deserve the truth. I mean, we still don't have all the documents over the Benghazi affair.
Or Fast and Furious.
Or for that matter. But let's focus on Benghazi for a minute. I mean, we still have the story about how there were employees who were separating damaging documents out of the files before the Accountability Review Board could get into it. And also, we only get documents, it seems, from the White House and from the State Department when there's a FOIA request from a nonprofit conservative group like Judicial Watch.
Takes them to court.
Instead of from, the administration and the State Department actually volunteering to disclose those documents. Doesn't that bother you in the same way?
It would bother me if it were true, and if there weren't 5 congressional committees, 3 of them.
But Lanny, those documents only came through the FOIA request.
But when you have 3 Republican chairmen of the Intelligence and Armed Services Committee disagreeing with you, we just have to have a disagreement that documents weren't turned over, because we disagree on that.
But it's not a question of disagreement. We know that those documents only came out through a FOIA request through Judicial Watch. That's a fact. Not from the committee subpoenaed it. All of those committees you just cited, they asked for the documents and they didn't get them, but Judicial Watch got them. How do you explain that?
The chair of the Armed Services Committee, Bud McEwen, and the chair of the the House Intelligence Committee, Mr. Rogers, have said that they received all documents, that there was no cover-up at the State Department, and there was no order to stand down. And the issue of whether documents exist or don't exist, I suppose there are always documents that some people would say should be turned over, some shouldn't.
Right.
But I only quote Republican House Committee Chairman of the Intelligence Committee and the Armed Services Committee.
Well, we speak with him often. We'll bring that up with him.
All they wanted, and they concluded in the opposite of what some of the Republican conservatives are still believing.
All right. So between now and when Hillary Clinton announces her presidency, if more documents come out and Chairman Rogers of the Intelligence Committee says, "Oh, whoa, we didn't see those,"
yes,
then you'll agree with me
greatly as to decisions to withhold documents, whether it's a Democratic administration or Republican administration. That's wrong. I just think we have a disagreement on what the facts are.
All right, Lanny, we'll leave it there. Good conversation. Thank you so much.